What if some of the people around you don't actually want you to succeed? Not openly, not consciously, but in a quiet way they would never admit. It's an uncomfortable idea, because most people prefer to believe that others are generally supportive, or at least neutral. But if you look closely at certain interactions, you may begin to notice small signals that don't quite align with that assumption. A lack of enthusiasm when you share good news. Subtle changes in tone when you talk about progress. A kind of silence where you expected encouragement. Nothing obvious, nothing direct, but enough to make you question what is really happening beneath the surface. This reaction is not always about dislike. In many cases, it is connected to comparison. Human beings naturally evaluate themselves in relation to others. When someone close to them improves, succeeds, or moves forward, it can shift that comparison. It creates a new reference point. And if that shift makes them feel behind, uncertain, or less confident in their own position, it can produce discomfort. That discomfort does not always lead to conscious negativity. Instead, it may appear as reduced support or quiet detachment. Another important factor is identity stability. People build internal narratives about who they are and where they stand. These narratives often include comparisons with others. If you have been part of that narrative in a certain role, similar level, similar position, similar pace, your change can disrupt it. Your progress introduces inconsistency into their internal model. And when that model becomes unstable, it creates tension. One way to reduce that tension is to reinterpret your success in a way that minimizes its impact. This can happen subtly, through reduced recognition or quiet indifference. Emotional proximity also plays a role. The closer someone feels to you, the more your progress can affect their internal comparison. A distant person's success is easier to observe without emotional involvement. But someone within your social circle becomes part of your reference system. Their progress feels more relevant, more immediate, and sometimes more challenging to process. This does not mean they want you to fail in a direct sense. It means your success changes how they feel about themselves, and that change can be uncomfortable. There is also the influence of fairness perception. People often carry an internal expectation that effort and outcome should align in a certain way. When they perceive that someone else's progress does not match their expectations, whether accurate or not, it can create a sense of imbalance. This perception can lead to subtle resistance, not because they consciously oppose you, but because the situation does not align with how they believe things should work. Another subtle dynamic involves attention. Success often shifts attention. People may begin focusing more on you, asking about your progress, or recognizing your achievements. This shift can change group dynamic. Those who previously occupied that space of attention may experience a sense of displacement. Again, this is not always conscious, but it influences behavior. Support may become less visible, not as an active choice, but as a response to changing dynamic. Over time, these small reactions can create a pattern. You may begin noticing that certain people respond differently when you succeed compared to when you struggle. When you face difficulty, there may be more openness, more engagement, more connection. But when you share progress, the response feels quieter, more reserved, or less present. This contrast can feel confusing, because it challenges the expectation that support should increase with success. As these patterns become more noticeable, your understanding of social dynamics begins to shift in a deeper and more stable way. You start recognizing that not all reactions are direct reflections of how others feel about you, and more importantly, they are not always accurate indicators of your value or direction. Many responses are shaped by internal processes that have little to do with your intentions, your effort, or your actual progress. This awareness changes how you interpret behavior at a fundamental level. Instead of assuming that reduced enthusiasm means rejection or hidden negativity, you begin considering the underlying factors that might be influencing it, such as comparison, insecurity, or shifting internal expectations. One of the most important shifts is separating your progress from others' reactions in a consistent and deliberate way. When you tie your sense of direction to how others respond, your decisions become influenced by external signals that are not only unstable but also incomplete. These signals fluctuate depending on mood, context, and personal circumstances that you cannot fully see. By maintaining a clearer separation, you reduce the impact of those signals and prevent them from shaping your path. You continue moving forward based on your own priorities, your own standards, and your own long-term perspective, rather than adjusting to momentary reactions that may not reflect reality. Another important realization involves expectation management at a deeper level. Expecting consistent support from everyone creates a fragile internal system because it relies on factors outside your control. When that support is not present, it leads to confusion, doubt, or even self-questioning. By adjusting expectations, you create a more stable and resilient perspective. You begin to understand that support varies not only between people but also across situations and time. This variation is normal and does not necessarily define your worth or your trajectory. This shift reduces emotional dependence on external validation and allows you to maintain direction even in the absence of visible encouragement. Emotional neutrality also becomes more valuable as your awareness grows. Instead of reacting strongly to subtle changes in others' behavior, you begin observing them with a level of distance and clarity. This does not mean becoming indifferent or disconnected, but it means allowing space between observation and interpretation. In that space, you reduce the likelihood of misreading intentions or overextending the meaning of small signals. This prevents unnecessary escalation of internal reactions and helps you remain grounded. Over time, this creates a more balanced internal state where external fluctuations have less influence on your emotional stability. Another transformation involves how you choose your environment with greater intention. As you become more aware of these dynamics, you begin identifying spaces where alignment is naturally stronger. These are environments where progress is recognized without constant comparison, where people engage without feeling threatened by change, and where interactions are less influenced by shifting internal narratives. Spending more time in these environments changes not only how you feel but also how you perform. Creates a feedback loop where stability supports clarity, and clarity supports consistent progress. Importantly, this entire process is not about labeling others as negative, jealous, or unsupportive. That kind of simplification can lead to misunderstanding and unnecessary division. Instead, it is about understanding how human perception operates under conditions of comparison, change, and uncertainty. When you understand these mechanisms clearly, the behavior you observe becomes less personal and more contextual. You stop reacting to every subtle shift and start focusing on what remains consistent. Ultimately, the idea that some people may quietly prefer you not to succeed is not about assigning blame or creating distance from others. It is about recognizing that human reactions are complex, layered, and often influenced by internal factors that are not immediately visible. When you see this clearly, you gain the ability to move forward without being overly influenced by subtle shifts in others' responses. And as that independence strengthens over time, your progress becomes more stable and more consistent because it is no longer tied to the variability of external perception, but anchored in your own direction and understanding.